There is a story we have been telling ourselves for decades now. A comfortable and seductive story, the kind that gets written into science fiction paperbacks and painted onto the walls of elementary school classrooms. It goes something like this. Mars is out there, cold and quiet and waiting. We build a rocket powerful enough to cross the void. We land. We set up a pressurized habitat, grow some food, and slowly but methodically build a second civilization on a second world. It is a beautiful story. It is also, from a purely physical and biological standpoint, one of the most dangerously misleading narratives that modern science communication has ever allowed to persist. Because the problem with Mars is not the rocket. The problem is not the distance, not the fuel-mass ratio, not the trajectory window. The engineering community has largely solved those puzzles or is well on its way to solving them. The problem, the deep and unforgiving and chemically precise problem, is what happens to the full biological architecture of the human body the moment it arrives. The universe has not simply made Mars inconvenient for complex life. It has made Mars actively, mathematically, and almost elegantly hostile to the continued structural integrity of everything that keeps a human being alive and functional. The cosmos does not shrug at our ambitions. It weaponizes the soil. It weaponizes the gravity. And it does so with the cold, indifferent precision of physical law. Let me offer you an analogy, because the physics here deserves something more than a list of alarming numbers. Imagine the most beautifully engineered glass submarine ever designed. The engineers who built it are geniuses of structural mechanics. They have calibrated every millimeter of thick curved walls to push back against the crushing external pressure of the deepest ocean trench on the planet. At the bottom of that trench, under millions of tons of water pressing inward from every geometric direction, the submarine is perfectly stable. It is in equilibrium. The crushing external force and the precisely calculated internal structural resistance are mathematically matched, and the vessel holds together with a kind of quiet perfection that borders on the poetic. Now suppose you take that precise, identically engineered submarine and you carry it gently up to the surface. You place it on a dry, quiet beach in the afternoon sun. The external crushing pressure disappears. Millions of tons of water are gone. And what happens? The internal pressure, the pressure the vessel was mathematically designed to resist outward force against now, has nothing to push against. The structural geometry of the submarine, which was only coherent in relation to the force it was built to counteract, violently shatters from the inside out. The vehicle destroys itself, not because it was poorly built, but because it was removed from the precise geometric conditions that gave its architecture meaning. The human body operates in this identically mathematical manner. We are, at the most fundamental physical level, compression machines. 4 billion years of biological evolution on the surface of a massive gravitational body have produced a skeletal and muscular geometry that is perpetually, relentlessly pushing back against the crushing downward pull of Earth. Our bones are not static calcium structures. They are dynamic, living, electrochemically active tissues that continuously remodel themselves in direct mathematical response to the mechanical load being placed upon them. When gravity pulls hard and consistently, the biological signal is clear. Build density, maintain mass, reinforce the geometry. The body reads the gravitational environment like a structural engineer reads a stress test, and it responds in kind. Mars has 38% of Earth's gravitational pull. That number sounds almost manageable. It is not. The moment a human being stands on the red surface of Mars, something deeply consequential happens inside the biological architecture. The localized chemistry of the body reads the new gravitational signal and draws the only logical conclusion available to it. The heavy skeletal structure that was required on Earth is no longer geometrically necessary. And so the body begins with perfect biological efficiency to dismantle it. Calcium leaches out of bones at an accelerated rate. Osteocalin, the protein molecule responsible for maintaining bone mineral density, begins to lose the hormonal signals that keep it active. The tubercular architecture of the femur, the hip, the vertebrae begins to thin and weaken at a rate that is not gradual and negligible, but measurable and alarming even within weeks. Muscle tissue follows the same trajectory. On Earth, every step you take, every time you rise from a chair, every unconscious postural fuuk Adjustment your body makes across a 16-hour waking day constitutes a mechanical resistance workout for the muscular system. The muscles of the legs, the back, the core are perpetually engaged in a low-level geometric, the battle against gravitational force. And that perpetual battle is precisely what maintains their mass and functional integrity. Remove the gravitational opponent, and the muscles begin to atrophy with a speed that would astonish you. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station in full microgravity can lose up to 1.5% of their bone density per month, even with rigorous daily exercise protocols. Mars is not microgravity, but it is profoundly insufficient gravity. And the biological degradation it induces, slower perhaps, but equally relentless, is a mathematical guarantee. The cardiovascular system undergoes its own parallel collapse. On Earth, the heart is constantly working against the vertical column of blood pressure created by full gravitational pull. The vascular walls, the architecture of the arterial system, the regulatory feedback loops of blood pressure chemistry are all calibrated for a 1G environment. In reduced gravity, the fluid distribution in the body shifts dramatically toward the upper body and head. The heart, receiving different pressure signals, begins to restructure itself. The left ventricle, which does the heaviest pumping work in normal gravity, can lose measurable mass in a matter of months in reduced gravitational environments. This is not a temporary adaptation. It is a remodeling of cardiac geometry that in the long term compromises the fundamental pumping efficiency of the organ, keeping you alive. So the biological submarine is already shattering from the inside out. But the gravity is not the only weapon the Martian environment deploys against complex biological life. There is the soil, and the soil is where the chemistry of this story becomes genuinely terrifying. It would be comforting if Martian regolith were simply dry, cold, lifeless sand, chemically inert, sterile, something you could theoretically sweep away from an airlock and call a minor inconvenience. But the surface chemistry of Mars is the product of billions of years of ultraviolet radiation, bombardment, thin atmosphere, and highly oxidizing chemical conditions that have produced something far more sinister than simple dust. Martian soil is saturated with perchlorates. Perchlorates are salts, sound chemical compounds, built around a chlorine atom bonded to 4 oxygen atoms in a precise geometric arrangement that makes them extraordinarily reactive with biological tissue. On Earth, perchlorates appear in certain dry desert environments in modest concentrations, and even at those concentrations, they are classified as significant environmental contaminants. The human thyroid gland, which depends on iodine uptake to synthesize the hormones that regulate every major metabolic process in the body, is particularly vulnerable. Perchlorates compete with iodine for the same cellular uptake mechanism. They occupy the receptors, they block the synthesis, the thyroid begins to fail, metabolism destabilizes. The cascade of hormonal disruption that follows touches virtually every organ system in the human body. Mars does not have modest concentrations of perchlorates. Mars has perchlorates distributed throughout the entire surface layer of its soil at concentrations that would be considered catastrophically toxic by any terrestrial law, environmental standard. And because the Martian atmosphere is so thin, so weak in its gravitational grip, the surface dust does not stay on the surface in any cooperative sense. It is electrostatically charged. It clings to every surface it contacts. It permeates every material with a persistence that is almost chemically aggressive. Dust storms on Mars can last for months, coating the entire planet in a layer of fine perchlorate, saturated particulate matter that infiltrates every exposed surface, every material seam, every imperfect seal. Now consider the thermodynamic trap this creates inside a human habitat. A closed habitat on Mars is, from a thermodynamic standpoint, a sealed system. Energy and matter cycle within it according to the second law of thermodynamics, the law that governs the directionality of entropy. Entropy in a closed system does not decrease. It increases. Disorder accumulates. And in the specific case of a Mars habitat, what this means practically is that every time an astronaut exits the habitat for a surface operation and returns through an airlock, they bring Martian dust with them. Even with the most sophisticated decontamination protocols conceivable, No mechanical or chemical system achieves perfect filtration. Some quantity of perchlorate saturated dust, however small, enters the habitat with every excursion. Over weeks, the accumulation is negligible. Over months, it is measurable. Over years, in a closed thermodynamic system with no capacity to flush the environment, with clean external air, the perchlorate concentration inside the habitat rises with a slow, invisible, and mathematically inevitable certainty. The astronauts are not living in a shelter. They are living inside a gradually concentrating chemical environment that is with perfect thermodynamic patience building toward toxic threshold levels. The habitat becomes a slow accumulation chamber for the precise compounds most destructive to factors, for the biological systems it was designed to protect. There is no engineering solution to this that does not itself create new thermodynamic costs. You can filter, but filtration systems fail incrementally, require replacement parts that must be manufactured or shipped across tens of millions of miles of space, and consume energy in a closed system where energy is already a precious constrained resource. You can decontaminate, but chemical decontamination agents themselves accumulate in a closed system. Every solution generates a new thermodynamic burden. The second law does not negotiate. And so we arrive at a picture of the Martian environment that is not simply unwelcoming in the casual sense that a cold mountain peak is unwelcoming. It is unwelcoming in the sense that the fundamental laws governing biological structure, gravitational mechanics, chemical reactivity, and thermodynamic entropy have converged on this particular world to produce conditions that are precisely, systematically, and comprehensively incompatible with the sustained operation of a human biological system. The universe, it seems, maintains biological sanctuaries with extraordinary precision. Earth is one such sanctuary, a world where the gravitational pull is calibrated to the exact range in which carbon-based biology can maintain structural coherence across a lifetime, where the chemical composition of the soil is dominated by compounds that biological systems can metabolize and tolerate, where the thermodynamic openness of the biosphere allows entropy to be continuously exported into the environment rather than accumulating catastrophically within it. These conditions are not luxuries. They are not amenities that a sufficiently determined engineering culture can replicate in a large, pressurized tent. They are the foundational physical prerequisites for the continued operation of the biological machinery we call life. Mars offers none of them. Not the gravitational loading, not the chemical compatibility, not the thermodynamic openness. And the deeper we look at the physics, the more clearly we see that the challenge of Mars colonization is not a problem of insufficient rocket thrust or inadequate material science. It is a problem of biological physics. It is the problem of taking a biological machine that was forged across geological timescales in one specific gravitational and chemical environment and placing it in a world where every major physical law conspires to accelerate its structural failure. The calcium in your bones is dissolving because gravity demands it. The iodine receptors in your thyroid are being chemically occupied because the soil chemistry guarantees it. The air inside your habitat is accumulating the precise compounds most destructive to your endocrine system because thermodynamics insists upon it. These are not engineering oversights. They are physical laws operating with their characteristic absolute and deeply impersonal already. We look at Mars through telescopes and rovers and we see a world that resembles something. Red mountains, dry river channels carved by ancient water, a sky that turns colors at sunset. It looks at certain moments almost familiar, and that familiarity is perhaps the most dangerous illusion the universe has ever offered us. Because beneath the visual similarity at the level of gravitational mechanics and soil, chemistry and closed system thermodynamics, Mars is not a slightly colder Earth. It is a world built by physics to systematically dismantle the architecture of any complex biology reckless enough to attempt resonance. The physical universe does not forbid our curiosity about Mars. It does not prevent our robots from rolling across its surface and analyzing its ancient chemistry. But it has written into the foundational laws of matter and energy a biological quarantine that no amount of engineering ambition or inspirational rhetoric has yet found a way to dissolve. The question of human survival on Mars is not waiting for a better rocket. It is waiting for a renegotiation with physics. And physics has always been the case, is not in the business of compromise.